Hey YouTube! So I recently started a new sketchbook focusing on alcohol markers, and I wanted to make a video kind of documenting my process. Now, in true to me fashion, I started with a small portrait series because I love portraiture. It's one of my favorite subject matters. So in this video I'm going to talk about my process and show you how I created this portrait. Now, whenever I start a new sketchbook, I like to dedicate the back of it to a swatch page so that I don't have to worry about that as I'm working. So for this sketchbook, I knew I wanted to focus on alcohol markers, but I also wanted to make it a bit of a challenge for myself, so I decided to incorporate brush markers. I also like to keep all my materials organized, so once I figured out what colors I was going to use, I threw them in a pencil bag that I had on hand. Now, because markers are such a permanent medium, I did want to go in with a mechanical pencil and establish a good foundation. For this step, I'm going to use the Delgard mechanical pencil that I put a grip on, and I'm also using the colored Uniball lead. It's just a nice erasable lead, you don't have to worry about it smudging, and it's kind of my go-to when establishing a sketch. I like to use a modified Loomis method for my head construction, and I've gone over this in depth in another video on my channel, so I'm not going to talk about that too much here. I really like the Loomis method because it allows you to construct a head given proper proportion, and it's got a high emphasis on the planes of the face, which is great for things like shading and rendering three-dimensional form. It really works whether you're going for a more stylized or realistic look. As I sketch, there's a few things that I'm trying to keep in mind, and one of them is having a loose grip on my pencil. I'm always trying to make strong and confident lines that aren't too sketchy. Now at this stage, most of the hair is done and I've started to work on some of the features of the face. I'm really just trying to imply those little details, make sure that my proportions are correct, and I'm not too committed to these lines because we're going to go over everything with the marker. So while my sketch is all about the structure of my portrait, the marker is going to be more about the value. So once I transition to the markers, I'm going to focus on something called a two-value read. A two-value read is something that you really come across a lot when it comes to painting, as it's kind of the most fundamental way that the human eye recognizes its subject matter. A great way to think about the two-value read is how screen printers set up their artwork. So it's got multiple layers, and each layer is a different color. I'm taking that similar approach with my markers. By taking this approach, I'm focusing just on areas of shadow. So I'm trying to differentiate areas of shadow and areas of light. And if you do this successfully, you can really do it with any kind of color. Now, obviously, YR23 is not the typical skin tone. It's a very kind of mustardy yellow color, but I really like it, so I decided to use it for my shadow areas. And I'll create some variance in my piece by using the Y28 for the shadow areas of the hair, but I'm just focused on building out those areas of shadow so that it can contrast the light and imply this portrait. And while I do have some variance in the values of my shadow areas just from layering the markers, you can really start to see just how impactful that two-value read is on your artwork. I personally find that when I keep this two-value read in mind, my portraits and really any of my subject matter takes on a lot more life and vitality because we're working within a set of structure of just how the human eye works. Now, if you're new to my channel, I realize that this is kind of art math, like it's a little bit more high level than what you would see in like a typical draw with me video, but I think it's really important. I wish more people would talk about it, and that's really what this is all about. It's like sharing knowledge and helping people along their creative journey, because the way I apply the concept of a two-value read is going to be completely different than how you apply it. And that's really where the fun of art is. You're not trying to replicate someone else's style. You're not trying to be the exact same person. You're trying to find your own creative voice. Now, because my 2-value read is established, I can go in and add some different values to that light sign. So I'm using the R01, the pinkish vanilla color, in order to imply a little bit of warmth and blood in the skin, and then I'm primarily taking the E30 and building out the rest of my skin tone. I can do this without fear of ruining the 2-value read by ensuring that those lighter areas are still lighter than the lightest value in my darkest area. And as I build out those values in the light, I also need to do that in the dark area. So I'm going to take the Y28, I'm going to emphasize some shadow areas and bring up that value range. We don't want to go too crazy in the darks because a darker area typically has less fidelity, so less detail and less value variance, but I do want to make sure that certain things are established, like where his chin and where the shadow on the neck falls. Now, beyond value, I do like to incorporate the color zones of the face. I think it just makes it look a bit more realistic. It implies the flushness of the cheeks, the redness of like the nose and the lips, and you can do it in a really subtle way that's not overpowering. I have an entire series dedicated to the color zones of the face because I kind of did a deep dive a few months ago, so definitely check that out if it's a new term for you. Now, whenever I work on anything, I'm constantly trying to get better at my craft, and the way that I incorporated a challenge into this series was using brush pens. So as I go in and kind of establish the darkest area with this Sepia Pentel brush pen, I'm really taking my time and going slow, primarily because brush pens are so flexible. You can get a wide variety of marks with them, but when you're like me and have a tendency to grip really hard or press into the paper really hard, that line quality can go out the window. So this was something that I was a little bit nervous to incorporate with this series, but after working in it so many times, feeling a lot more confident. And if you're someone that also struggles with pressing too hard, I would definitely suggest picking up some of these, as they're a great way to kind of break that habit. Now when it comes to rendering the hair just in general, I'm using not only the shadow area to imply more color, I'm also leaving those stark whites exposed for those like really bright pieces of hair that catch the light. I think this added a lot of dimension, and it's definitely something that I'm going to be using in my portraiture moving forward. Now at this point, my portrait's pretty much done. I'm going to add a few details and correct some values, but it's really just about kind of fine-tuning it at this point. The structure, the 2-value read, all of that's established, so I don't have to worry about it too much. As a final touch, I'll go in with a white gel pen, just to add a little highlight to the eyes and to correct any areas of white that I might have. And it's really with these last touches that the portrait all starts to come together. So I hope you enjoyed the video and learning a bit about my process with alcohol markers. If you did find this beneficial, make sure to give me a like so I know, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of my content.